Chapter 1191. Qin Mo's smile didn't matter. The old general, who was sitting opposite him, almost got scalded by the tea in his mouth. Even his heart trembled. He turned and exchanged glances with the adjutant beside him. He was obviously asking what was wrong with him. The adjutant shook his head slightly, still in a daze. He was similarly shocked. In the past, the almighty devil would smile, but every time he did, it was vague. That kind of smile was definitely not a good thing. It was when he wanted to kick someone out of the army, throw some trouble for the chief to deal with, or anger the regiment commander who was stationed opposite him. In short, it was not a smile in the real sense of the word. Now, the adjutant felt as though his eyes were about to be blinded. The main thing was that the almighty devil didn't stop smiling. He didn't know what he was thinking. Cough. The old general finally couldn't take it anymore. He placed his fist by his lips and pretended to ask casually, "Are you in a good mood today?" "Am I?" When Qin Mo asked, the smile on his face disappeared. The old general didn't want to say anything else. "How dare you ask me? I'm already smiling so much. What do you think?" But such straightforward words could only be mocked in his heart. Did something good happen? The old general knew that he had to understand Qin Mo's thoughts before he went out for a mission. Qin Mo took a sip of tea and replied casually, "Same as usual." Damn it! Who would believe such a lie if it was told? The old general had a bad temper, but he couldn't do anything in front of Qin Mo. He treasured talents too much. "I asked my nephew just now. He isn't sensible. He didn't make any big mistakes, but the unit allows such small mistakes. Everything is done according to the rules and he will be punished accordingly." After hearing the bureau chief's words, Qin Mo suddenly said, "A little." What? The old general thought he was using the opportunity to kick his nephew away. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal if he really kicked him away. The mission was too dangerous. Qin Mo's voice was calm. "Don't let him go to any small forest in the future. It will cause misunderstandings." The old general was confused. He didn't understand why he said that, but it was a small matter. "I'll get the adjutant to talk to him later. What do you think of his condition?" This was what the old general wanted to ask. Qin Mo placed his teacup down. "Very suitable." 3 words, no more, no less. The old commander had mixed feelings for a moment. Soldiers that Qin Mo took a liking to were always good soldiers. However, it also meant that he had to carry out that overseas mission. Qin Mo could sense the old general's thoughts. His gaze wasn't as bright as before. Instead, it was as dark as the night, giving off a sense of relief. "Don't worry, once I bring my soldiers out, I will bring them all back. Actually, I already had a premonition." The old general laughed and sighed. "To be honest, I'm quite proud that our Yi family has such a soldier. Don't think that he's just a hooligan. He really likes to stay in the army. I've seen his information. You guys have a pattern in selecting people." When he finished close combat and came out of the army, a psychiatrist contacted him in advance. Yes. Qin Mo didn't deny it. His psychological condition isn't bad. He has 70% more self-defense awareness than the other fighting champions. The old general smiled and said, "What exactly do you like about him?" "Skills and marksmanship. Of course, these aren't the main points. Most importantly, he gives off a feeling just by standing there," Qin Mo said slowly. The old general hadn't expected Qin Mo to pick his nephew because of his aura. Instantly, his interest was piqued. "What feeling?" "I'm rich, I'm the crown prince." Qin Mo placed his teacup down. The old general choked with his words. This really wasn't a compliment? Why did it feel like this cold fellow was describing a nouveau riche? There are many people in the army, but once we are overseas, we need to consider all aspects. We need to pick the best out of the best. These people can't have a strong military aura on them. If not, they will be recognized the moment they disguise themselves. Their psychological qualities are even more important. After all, we are facing a hypnotist this time. Mercenary organizations also look at people's appearances. Qin Mo looked at the old general. "Your nephew is smart, and with his unique aura, he is very suitable for this mission." The old general knew that the decisions of the personnel were approved by the higher-ups. "When exactly do we set off?" Qin Mo's gaze was calm. "At 2 in the morning the day after tomorrow, The operation team will disappear from the army with the excuse of a military exercise. It's a level 1 overseas mission, and it isn't suitable to expose your identity there. Hence, even the troops have to keep it a secret. I understand. I'll arrange everything. At this point, the old commander raised his hand and patted his shoulder. I'll leave Yilong to you. Qin Mo stood up and straightened his military cap. His gaze was dark and his reply was a military salute. On the other side, Bo Jiao had changed into a new combat uniform after her shower. She had brought all the equipment and even her shoes had been changed to brown military equipment. A German military knife hung behind her waist. She was checking the ammunition for the last time. The ammunition wasn't real. It was specially used by the army for military exercises. If it hit someone, they would automatically be knocked out. But the impact was still there. It would hurt a little when it hit her face. She reached out and lifted the black mask on her face, successfully covering her young and handsome face. Only a pair of extremely dark eyes could be seen. At this moment, the sky outside had darkened. Bo Jiao held her rifle with one hand and entered the forest from the back of the training ground. Other than Crown Prince, no one else had seen her whereabouts. Prince had been running with weights as punishment. When he saw the slender figure about to enter the area, he ran over and said, I have a feeling that the devil is hostile towards me. Can you persuade your cousin? I'm just an accomplice and you're the main culprit. How am I supposed to eat if I have to run so many laps? Bo Jiao replied insincerely, if you don't eat dinner, you can lose weight. Also, you're thinking too much. Captain is so handsome. Why would he be hostile towards you? How would I know? Prince was puzzled too, but as a good roommate, he had to remind the youngster. Pay attention when you go in. I think with that guy's sniping skills, he might be hiding there and waiting to shoot you in the head. Alright, have you played online games before? You'll get lucky and get chicken dinner. That's the logic. Don't die the moment you land. Chapter 1192. Stop bragging. You're younger than me. How can you be more experienced than me? Prince replied nonchalantly. Bo Jiao shrugged. Without another word, she leaped into the forest. Her speed was shocking. The Crown Prince, who had just raised his head, swallowed hard. He had wanted to talk to the other party, but it was really annoying for him to run alone while carrying weights. However, this guy really didn't have much of a chance of winning against that team sniper. The new sniper thought the same way. He had entered the forest earlier than Bo Jiao. They had discussed and decided to enter from different entrances so that it would be easier to fight. That way, no one would be at a disadvantage. But when he had sent the sniper in, his roommate had said, Are you really going to fight him? Honestly, he's just a technical soldier. He can't be compared to you. There's no point in fighting him. It's purely to make him back off. It's also to let him know that in the last drill, he single-handedly defeated the team over there because of the sniper's cooperation. If this person doesn't even know these 2 points and stays in the army just because of his connections, there will be a lot of drawbacks when carrying out missions. Needless to say, the sniper was right. His roommate didn't stop him. The temperature in the forest was slightly lower than the training ground. It was because of the vegetation. The lush trees stood quietly, and the tips of the trees that seemed to pierce through the sky swayed gently with the breeze. The exposed roots on the ground intertwined with each other and grew intertwined, like brown pythons entwining together, making love to each other. In the depths of the dense and serene forest, the sounds of birds and insects could be heard from time to time. It gave the originally dull forest a mysterious vibe. Bo Jiao was dressed in the same color combat uniform. She held the rifle in her hands and bent her body to search for the best shooting spot. At this moment, the two of them didn't know that besides them, there was another group of mercenaries planning to invade from the north. There was this group of mercenaries because of the hostage rescue. It was all because of the hostage rescue. When Kawang, who was outside the border, heard the news, he opened his eyes that had been in deep sleep. Then he pushed the person beside him away. As the boss of an organization, he didn't look ferocious at all. He was in his 40s, and he was wearing a white coat. It was easy for people to put down their guard. However, it was this person who, as a psychiatrist, used his knowledge to kill many people. This case was reported by many police departments. Because the way he killed people was too horrifying. The reason why this person was special was because he had taught 2 students. No, it shouldn't be said that he taught her. It was because both of them had attended his classes. One of them was Qin Mo while the other was Fan Zibing, Fan Jia's brother. However, it was the same 2 people. The first one felt that his teaching style wasn't suitable for him, so he ended his elective early and chose to attend another professor's class. The second one became his disciple. It had to be said that both of them were outstanding in the field of psychology. However, the former was still weaker than the latter. This had always been Kawang's evaluation. In his heart, a person without any weaknesses was the strongest. Although Qin Mo's aptitude was better. However, he was no match for Fan Bing. Chapter 1193. Zi Bing had been able to leave a psychological suggestion for Qin Mo before he died. This wasn't something many people could do. In Kawang's eyes, a psychologist who had been hypnotized was useless. He didn't take the people who were stationed at the borders of Wuxia seriously. After all, they had successfully transported a huge batch of goods in the past. Who would have expected the recent increase in security? With his methods, his men had been captured. Kawang had heard that the ones who had captured him were a small team from the nearby army. He had heard that there was a person with good disguise skills. But regardless of whether they were good or not, they had dared to touch his men. He had only touched one of their soldiers. He wanted to let them know that they shouldn't keep trying to cut off his source of income. Kawang was good at psychological warfare and was clear about the defense. China was vast. The uninhabited zone was many meters long, and there were some places that couldn't be detected by radar. As long as they didn't enter China's airspace, it wasn't a problem to drive a military vehicle into the uninhabited zone. However, they were strict in terms of weapons. Kawang had already thought of a solution. It was just a few guns. This was the border after all. He wanted to let them know that China couldn't do anything to him at the moment. With so many hostages, Kawang wasn't afraid of anything. Furthermore, he had wanted to find Qin Mo for a long time. It was time for the person who had caused him to lose a leg to disappear completely. Kawang narrowed his eyes, glancing at the poppy in his hands. When he lifted the corners of his lips, it was a smile, but it gave off a sinister vibe that came from the depths of his heart. Fan Jia was standing in front of the computer, tapping on the keyboard. Kawang walked over. "How is it? Have you found the person?" "Not yet. I don't know what happened to him. He seems to have disappeared." Fan Jia's eyes were filled with disgust when she spoke. Kawang was wearing a white coat, his gait a little crooked. "Are you sure this person means something to Qin Mo?" "I'm sure." Fan Jia's eyes were still filled with sadness. "I don't know what he saw in her. She managed to get close to him just by dressing up as a man. Now that I think about it, this woman is rather scheming." Kawang glanced at Fan Jia. "Don't use your unnecessary emotions. The most important thing now is this person. Kidnap her so that Qin Mo will be captured." "Yes, master." In front of Kawang, Fang Jia had toned down her arrogance. After all, she hadn't been very successful in her mission in Wuxia. Originally, he thought that he could use those people on the internet to carry out business transportation. She hadn't expected Z to suddenly appear and mess up her plans. In reality, Fan Jia still didn't understand. Wasn't Z supposed to be dead? Why did it appear in Wuxia? In the end, Master found a way to find Z's base. She started to lock onto the target again. If she was the sniper, which tree would she choose? The sniper, who had been hiding in the tree for a long time, had already adjusted his breathing. He had even lowered his body a little. His gun could almost sweep a few meters in all directions. As long as there was any movement, he would be able to see it and shoot. The technical soldier wouldn't be able to escape. However, the sniper was impressed by his courage. Even if he had gotten in because of his connections, he wasn't a coward since he had accepted his challenge. It was a pity. He would have to tell that person how important shooting was during a mission. The sniper's marksmanship was good and he was one of the best among the recruits. Hence, he was confident. Chapter 1194. However, the newbie seemed to have forgotten something. A sniper was most afraid of being discovered and attacked from the back. Of course, most people wouldn't have thought of this. But Bojo was different. When she had been at the Fifth Avenue, she had relied on her judgment of the best vantage point to move through the darkness with ease. Besides, she was an assassin. Be it in the game or in real life, she was best at attacking from the back. The sniper obviously didn't know that in the esports industry, people like to call him the shadow killer. Under normal circumstances, the so-called shadow killer would sneak around to your back and give you the most fatal blow. Naturally, the sniper wasn't aware of this. In his mind, he had always been a technical soldier. A thick layer of clouds started to cover the sky above the forest, covering the entire moon. The night sky was as dark as ink. All that could be heard was the sniper trying his best to control his breathing. The sound was very soft and weak. It was a special adjustment made by the sniper to hide himself. He had his own calculations and his concealment skills were excellent. Indeed, Bojo didn't notice him. But when the youngster realized that he couldn't see where the sniper would cover him, he started to attack from the sniper's position. The wind in the forest was icy, freezing the air around him. There wasn't a single sound in the surroundings, other than the occasional chirping of insects. The sniper didn't move, observing everything in front of him. He might not be better than his opponent in terms of technique, but he would definitely be stronger in battle. Especially in such a forest, it wasn't just important to be familiar with the terrain, the natural conditions were also important. The temperature was cold today, making it hard for him to breathe. Besides, the quieter the surroundings, the more advantageous it was for him. That way, he would be able to see even the slightest movement in the grass. Just as the sniper was thinking about it, he saw something moving in the bushes in front of him. He raised his gun abruptly, adjusting his shooting angle, locking onto his target and firing with unerring accuracy. The bullets used during the drill were more like rubber bullets, producing a low and dull sound that couldn't be heard if one wasn't close. The sniper knew he had hit the target. The bushes quietened down. He adjusted the line of sight again and saw a wild rabbit lying there. It was gray with a little bit of white. It must have been digging in the haystack just now. Now that it was lying on the dark green grass, it was discovered. The sniper furrowed his brows, feeling that something was amiss. He adjusted his direction and scanned his surroundings. There was nothing. He was probably making a fuss out of nothing. While the sniper was thinking about all this, he didn't notice a faint black shadow swiftly circling behind him from the moment he raised his gun to shoot. The path it took was also very tricky, as though it didn't even cause a ripple in the water. The figure raised her eyes, and the moonlight shone into her eyes. There was a hint of evilness at the corner of her mouth. What a pity for the little gray rabbit. However, throwing stones to test the waters was indeed the fastest method. With that thought in mind, Bojo turned sideways and quickly hid herself. She was still wearing a black mask on her face. Even when she was lying on the ground, she didn't remove her mask. Chapter 1195. She tilted her head to the side, making one last adjustment to the distance. There wasn't a single person around, only the moonlight from Tsinghua University illuminating the youngster's side profile. Her tall nose bridge and bright eyes seemed to be unable to be suppressed by the darkness. Bojo wasn't best at long-range shooting, but she had seen the Almighty's demonstrations. Breathing was important, but it was equally important not to shoot recklessly. The sniper on the tree still did not understand that once the sniper fired and missed the target, it meant that the battle was already over. That was because the sniper's greatest fear was to have his position discovered. It was obvious that the shot that landed on the gray rabbit had forced the sniper into a passive position. They were all from the military, hence, they understood this point. Of course, the sniper hadn't expected someone to be lying in the bushes. He estimated the terrain and prepared to leave his current position. But at this moment, the first gunshot he had ever heard in his life rang out behind him. The speed was so fast that the sniper's eyes widened in disbelief. There was a flash of light. The sniper quickly moved his spear. But it was too late. The white smoke that rose from his body had revealed many things. Moreover, after he had been hit by the blank cartridge, he had felt a tremor and pain in his chest. If it had been a real bullet, his heart would have been blown apart. Did that person calculate that he would turn around, and that's why he shot down at this position? The impact from the blank cartridge caused him to take a step back. He had to grab onto the tree trunk to prevent himself from falling. It was a tricky angle. There was only a slight gap and he would have been killed in one shot. The sniper held onto the tree trunk, astonishment and shock filling his heart. He couldn't believe how the person had managed to find such an angle. Just because of a technical soldier? But the truth was that he had been killed in one shot. He hadn't been able to react in time. He hadn't even considered the possibility that the person had predicted his position and moved behind him to ambush him. He had been like a ghost in the night, silent. If the person hadn't fired at him, he wouldn't have been able to detect his position. This feeling made the sniper feel like he was really on the battlefield. It was over before it had even begun. If it was on the battlefield, he knew very well what it meant for their team's backline sniper to be eliminated like this. This meant that his blind confidence would kill his teammates. He thought he was aiming at someone, but in fact, he was already being aimed at. It was said that shooting was the key to becoming a sniper. In fact, a good sniper tested too many things, such as a stable mental state and an analysis of the situation. However, he did not manage to do all of this today. The sniper froze on the spot, his entire body numb and stiff, as though he had lost all his strength. He leaned back against the tree trunk. Thinking about how terrible his previous performance was, he felt his face burning. He didn't even know what kind of situation his opponent was in, yet he could easily make a judgment. The facts proved that even if number 10 had connections, he was also capable. Chapter 1196. At this moment, the youngster, who had been lying in the bushes, stood up. She shook off the night dew on her body, her hair still carrying the scent of fresh grass. If she hadn't pulled her black mask away, it would have been hard to tell that there was another person there. The sniper watched the scene, his heart flipping over. Sweet, sour, bitter and spicy. He didn't know what to feel. The youngster raised her gun, glancing over at him. It was obvious that he had won. The sniper chuckled bitterly, sliding down the tree trunk. In reality, the sniper was at a disadvantage against Bo Jiao, who specialized in cutting the backline. As an esports assassin, Bo Jiao was adept at fighting in the wild, capturing people and hiding in the bushes. Bo Jiao didn't intend to stay in the forest for long since it was a deserted area. The temperature was freezing. Moreover, she wanted to use her new car to make the Almighty happy. She might not have experience in love, but she understood the process. 3 conditions. Heat up, heat up, heat up again. That was the only way to marry her. With that, she pulled her black mask over her face, preparing to leave. The sniper also saw through the young man's plan. He had lost this match, and he would tell everyone about it. Through this match, he realized that the real battlefield might not be what he had imagined it to be. At this moment, neither of them noticed the silence in the forest. It was as though a ferocious beast was staring at them from the depths of the forest. It was the group of mercenaries that had reached the area. The 5 of them were extremely fast. The way they carried their spears was no different from the local soldiers stationed there. Since it was night time, they couldn't see each other's features. Hence, it was impossible to tell which country they were from. The only distinguishing feature was their military uniform. Just as the sniper was about to leave, he saw the figure moving past him. He paused in his action of raising his spear. Then, he turned his head and grabbed the young man. He lowered his voice and said, "There seems to be someone here. Is it because of the military exercise again? Did they send scouts here first?" Bo Jiao didn't think much of it. She smiled. "Let them scout, it's not a big deal." It was a habit to carry a backpack on one's back. But the moment she lowered her head, she seemed to hear something. The sound was very subtle, making it impossible to determine the exact location of the other party. But for one thing, was it like a language? Bo Jiao couldn't hear it clearly, but she frowned suddenly. She took a step back in the direction she was originally heading towards and leaned towards the direction where the voice was coming from. The sound of her footsteps was very soft. Only the sound of her clothes brushing against the grass could be heard. It was as if the night wind was blowing, very quiet. At that moment, the sniper finally witnessed the youth's ability to hide in the forest. It was so quiet that even his footsteps seemed to be judged according to the terrain. All his movements were hidden in the night. Not everyone he knew could do that. The closer Bo Jiao got, the clearer the sound. However, the clearer it was, the easier it was to be discovered. The sniper was right behind her. The two of them had no idea what kind of danger they were about to step into. Chapter 1197. Bo Jiao tilted her body and bent her waist slightly so that she could hear the sound more clearly. But what came faster than the sound was the sudden smell of blood on the tip of his nose. That's right, it was the smell of blood. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any smell of blood here since they were using rubber bullets. It wasn't possible for them to cause any injuries. Bo Jiao's frown deepened. At the same time, she tightened her grip on the rifle. At this moment, she heard the sound clearly. It was indeed a language, but it wasn't the language of Wuxia. It wasn't even the language of an ethnic minority. Instead, there was a mix of M and T languages. The person's voice wasn't loud either. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she was certain that they weren't Chinese. They weren't Chinese. They were wearing their camouflage uniform. Bo Jiao's heart sank. She wanted to pull the sniper back and retreat. But at this moment, the sound not far away suddenly disappeared. It was as though a conversation had come to an abrupt end. There were a total of 5 mercenaries. The person standing in the middle seemed to have heard something. He stopped abruptly and made a shushing gesture. The others also stopped talking. Not only that, but they also exchanged glances with each other. It was clear that they had sensed something. Another prey had come knocking on their door. That was the first reaction of the 5 of them. Then, under the cover of the night, they turned and scanned their surroundings. Finally, they confirmed a point and raised the rifle in their hands. The person with the Bluetooth earpiece tilted his head. The strongest person in front smiled bloodthirstily. He threw a military knife out. With a swoosh, it slid through the bushes and shot straight at a rabbit. The sniper watched as the military knife flew past him. The youngster's reaction was extremely fast. Before the military knife could reach him, he had already moved the rabbit over. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that such a military knife wouldn't appear in such a place. It wasn't the equipment in their military unit. In the army, what weapons the garrison soldiers used, which models and what their functions were all kept secret. Only their own people knew, and no one would pick up the model, even if it was a military knife. The people on the other side were very fast. They didn't give the snipers any time to react and rushed over. The mercenary was dragged by the youngster, and he maintained his posture without moving. His entire body had merged with the grass beside him, and even his face was buried in it. This also meant that they couldn't see where the other party was. At first, the sniper didn't understand why the young man didn't leave immediately. After all, Rabbit was in front of him. He knew very well that if they had moved just now, they would have been killed just like this rabbit. The newcomer seemed to feel that the situation was a little boring and mumbled something. This time, the sniper's expression changed. This wasn't from his team, and he wasn't Chinese either. The sniper's reaction wasn't as fast as Bo Jiao because of the difference in their perception of language. However, both of their hearts were the same. They couldn't sink any further. Chapter 1198. The person on the other side walked over to them. He even raised his rifle and touched the rabbit. The distance between them was less than a meter. The sniper's breathing tightened. It wasn't because he could see it, but because when someone was holding a rifle near you, you would definitely be able to sense the intense murderous aura. A rabbit. The person raised his rifle and picked up the gray rabbit. Bo Jiao could understand his language and could hear the suspicion in his tone. Soon, the man raised his gun again and fired at the grassland. Bo Jiao wanted to lift her head, but she lowered it once more. Fortunately, they were at a low altitude and weren't injured by the stray bullets. But the destructive power made her eyes sink. The other party was using a real rifle. That wasn't all, it was silenced. It was probably because they were in the forest and it had rained. Some of the defense systems at the border weren't perfect. This way, they wouldn't be discovered. Bo Jiao probably didn't know what they were here for. But she knew she couldn't let them go any further. 1,000 meters away was China's first defense line. It was a common sight at the borders. Even the difference between Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia was due to this defense line. The inner circle was the country. Once they passed the defense line, there would be local villages. Even though there weren't many people living there, there would be scattered houses. This meant that there would be ordinary civilians living there. It was obvious what the defense line meant. Don't waste your bullets. The leader walked over and lowered his voice. Search and see if it's really a rabbit or someone else. The leader wasn't bothered. Even if there is someone, they will treat us as a unit. When we meet a patrol, we just have to keep quiet and let Bassoon answer and we will be able to eliminate them. We'll leave after killing one more person, do you hear me? The leader was worried they wouldn't stop killing. After all, we have already entered China's borders. Once we are out of the forest, they won't be able to use their guns. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of international law. But in this forest, once we are discovered, we will lose in terms of numbers. Hence, we have to restrain ourselves. After killing 3 people, we will leave our organization's name. This is the best way to provoke them, understand? Their hushed conversation traveled into Bo Jio's ears. After killing 3 people they would kill 1 more? In other words, they had already killed 2 people? When? Where? If it was here, it was impossible for there to be no news to report. Could it be the regiment next door? After they had killed someone from the neighboring clan, they had jumped over here to continue killing. Organization? Bo Jio lowered her lids, a glint flashing past her eyes. It was cold. She thought she had a rough idea of which organization he was talking about. Recently, there was only one organization that they had made enemies with. It had to be said that these people were very fast and very agile. They were even bold and careful enough to sweep through the area just now. If it hadn't been for Bo Jio, she might have been shot even as she lay prone. After those people confirmed that there was nothing here, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they expanded their search area. Such opponents were the most difficult to deal with. Chapter 1199. Fortunately, they had the terrain advantage. Both Bo Jio and the sniper were adept at regulating their breathing, maintaining the perfect disguise for a full 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, the 5 of them stopped searching. Looks like it's just a rabbit. The leader put away his spear and said, "All right, let's not waste any more time. Take advantage of this time to take some pictures of the situation here. When we get out of here, we'll upload them to the internet." It was common knowledge that there was no signal in the no man's land. The 5 of them spoke through the Bluetooth earphones in their ears. As soon as he heard they were going to take pictures, the sniper clenched his fists. Every checkpoint at the border was very important. Once these people took a photo and posted it on the internet, it would be very easy for them to be ambushed if there were any problems at the border in the future. The sniper understood this. It was impossible for Bo Jio not to understand. It was just that a head-on clash was extremely disadvantageous for them. After all, the other party was using real guns, and they had more people than them. Everyone was even wearing a communication earpiece. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of a one-on-one attack, but under such circumstances, it wasn't possible. The sniper also understood that if they made a sound now, not only would they be discovered, but they would also be of no use to the current situation. This was not because of anything else, but because the troops did not know that this group of people had entered. What loophole did he slip into without anyone noticing? Beads of sweat formed on the sniper's forehead. As the sound of footsteps rose, those people finally left the area around them. The sniper was the first to stand up, but the young man grabbed him back. "Go back and tell Captain that there's an enemy invasion. Tell Captain Qin the general direction they're heading in. I'll follow them and mark the way. I have a USB drive on me that has the same origin as Captain Qin's USB drive. It will detect the enemy's presence within a certain range. Tell this to Captain Qin. Since they're here, we can't let them leave." The sniper's eyes darkened. "No, you go back. I'll stay. It's more suitable for me to stay. You're a good sniper, but you're only suitable as a sniper. This time, it's obvious that you won't be able to use a sniper. I still have some dry goods in my bag that can be put to use. I hope that you can rush back to the base as soon as possible and inform Captain Qin. Now that the 2 teams are connected, they might not be able to gain any advantage here. These people will run to the next team. We can't let them roam around our base as they please." As an assassin, she had always treated the wilderness opposite her as her home. How could she tolerate some people killing their people and taking photos of them in her own territory? This was a provocation, and if this provocation was not suppressed, the other party would only become more and more unbridled. Besides, she could still remember how he had taught her calligraphy after watching a movie when she had been very young. Those who offend China will be punished no matter how far away they are. People often say that Wuxia is a country with a large population and a poor quality, etc. Yes, it was still developing, and it was indeed not perfect enough. Chapter 1200. At this moment, the lights on the second floor of the military base were still brightly lit. Someone was doing a psychological test and tactical evaluation. But he wasn't very focused. This was the third time Qin Mo raised his head to look at the door. Even though his face was still elegant, his brows weren't relaxed. The door didn't seem to have any intention of letting anyone in. The air was filled with the scent of a shower. The scent of the shower gel hadn't dissipated. But Qin Mo didn't know why he felt uneasy when he couldn't see that person today. He glanced at the clock at the side once more. Qin Mo reached out for his jacket and walked out of the room. He walked towards Bo Jio's dormitory. At this moment, Prince had just completed 10 rounds of weights. He was so tired that he was lying on the bed like a zombie. He hadn't eaten much for dinner and just wanted to lie there. It was a pity that he wasn't lying in the right position. He was lying on Bo Jio's bed. When Qin Mo entered, he was the first person he saw. He arched a brow. Prince wanted to stretch his body, but when he saw the slender figure standing at the door, his arms stiffened. Even his yawns stopped. F***ck, who could tell him why the devil was here? Prince had always been a fearless person, but at this moment, he stood up instinctively and saluted. Captain Qin. Qin Mo glanced at him, his gaze landing on the single bunk bed behind him. Where did she go? It was a simple question, but it sent chills down Prince's spine. Even though there were many duels in the military base, there weren't many duels in the jungle. After today's phone incident, Prince had a basic understanding of the devil's methods. He had decided to betray his teammate. Since she was his family, he wouldn't be severely punished. Reporting, Sugar Daddy. Prince bit his lips. Recruit number 10 was challenged by someone in the jungle. He should be in an uninhabited area outside the military base. Qin Mo's brows furrowed. H*T. This was really a H*T. Even though he wasn't the person involved, Prince didn't think he was happy. It seemed like even if his brother won, he wouldn't be in a good state. With such a cousin, life must be tough. Prince's mind was filled with thoughts. At this moment, Qin Mo threw out another question. How long have you been in there? Prince didn't expect the other party to think about the time. If it was his previous instructor, he would definitely be furious. Sir, it should be more than 2 hours. Qin Mo tilted his head, stuffing one hand into his pocket. When he looked up, Ji Shitting's voice was heard. Even Prince, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but sigh. The other party was indeed handsome. Even someone like him, who had always won with his looks, felt a little inferior. Don't tell me this military unit selects people based on their looks? It's taking too long. This was Qin Mo's first sentence when he turned his head. For some reason, his eyes seemed to have dimmed. Prince didn't understand. Too long. She's good at taking a detour and fighting in the jungle. 2 hours is too long for her to eliminate a sniper. Qin Mo repeated himself because he was still analyzing the situation. Prince's mouth was agape. Honestly, Captain Qin, that sniper is the best rookie in the team other than Wolf. This is a battle, not a one-sided slaughter. Why did you say that he's a financial backer? And that you'll destroy him? Why did he have the feeling that someone had unknowingly shown off his little brother? Qin Mo looked at the night sky outside. He retracted his gaze and continued to ask, which direction did she enter the no man's land from? The west side of the training ground, the small forest. The moment Prince finished his sentence, the tall figure in front of him turned around. She didn't even look at his expression as she walked down the stairs. What did she mean? Prince was dumbfounded. At this moment, the sniper understood that if he continued to stay, he would only be delaying the rescue of his comrades. The military unit was only 1,000 meters away. He had to hurry so that he could pass the information to the military unit in time and save his comrades. Just as Bo Jio had said, She was in charge of tracking them and keeping them in the forest at the crucial moment. The forest at night was undoubtedly dangerous. The wind was chilly. Amidst the bushes, the youngster held her rifle and moved in a snake-like manner, silently catching up to the mercenaries. It wasn't because the mercenaries were slow, but because Wuxia was too fast. Other than killing, their main goal was to collect information on the defense system. Hence, along the way, they used their phones to take pictures of every place with metal mesh. Of course, they couldn't touch the metal mesh because it was used to detect intruders. The moment anyone touched it, they would be electrocuted. This time, it was obvious that these mercenaries came prepared. They wore anti-electricity gloves and touched the iron net. Then they laughed. This kind of defense system really can't do anything good at the border. In the future, if anyone wants to take revenge on the Wuxia troops, they will have to wear an anti-electricity suit. The signal defense tower over there isn't bad. Another person raised his hand. Gotcha. Another photo was locked on his phone. There doesn't seem to be anyone here. We'll be inside if we go any further. Should we kill a few civilians? We've been walking for so long, I'm hungry. Haha. Don't fight and kill all day. Have a meal and give them some fans. Bring our organization's products to them. That's the best choice. The leader raised his rifle. Are you done? It's done. Let's go to the other team. There aren't as many people here. Don't forget, we are still short of one person. After saying that, the leader was about to pass through the residential area of the nearby village and head toward the 147th Regiment. Previously, Wuxia had mentioned that they couldn't allow anyone to pass through the defense net. Because on the other side of the defense net, everyone was unarmed. The youngster's dark eyes looked down. Then, he turned his body sideways and pressed his back against the tree. Then, he pulled open the military backpack he was carrying. Inside was the only electronic car she had with her. She had wanted to give it to the Almighty today, but it seemed like she had to use it now. Chapter 1201. The youngster's side profile looked cold under the moonlight. The tear mole at the corner of her eye was very obvious, making her look like a fox immortal. Her fingers brushed past the palm-sized electronic car. She reached into the black scarf and pulled it up. Then she bent down and disappeared into the night like a shadow. There was fog in the forest. Perhaps she could make use of this. The youngster reached out to hold the military dagger at her waist. A glint flashed across her dark eyes. Then she controlled the arrow keys with one hand and headed in the opposite direction. The few of them were still in a conversation. When we came previously, we only heard that there was a regiment here. We never expected to meet a hidden unit. If news of this gets out, it will give the soldiers a lot of pressure. It will save them the trouble of trying to cross the border to capture us. Capture us? The leader laughed, his tone filled with disdain. With these people? Which one of them is King's match? That's right, with King around, even if they cross the border, they will only be sending themselves to their deaths. The few of them burst into laughter. Their expressions were extremely arrogant and bloodthirsty. Right at this moment, a unique sound, similar to the sound of a gasoline cap being opened, entered their ears. But it wasn't normal for such a sound to be heard here. When they heard the sound, all of them stilled. Even their backs could tell that they were on high alert. Even though it was a small movement, it was enough to show that these people were indeed, as Wuxia had said, they weren't easy targets. The leader was the fastest to react. He immediately looked to the right, and his face went blank for a moment. Actually, it wasn't his fault that his expression was blank. It was mainly because of the thing he saw. A red heart lantern. A small electronic car with a red heart lantern. F***CK. Was such a thing even supposed to appear here? The leader's lips twitched visibly. The four mercenaries beside him had an indescribable expression on their faces. That wasn't all. As the small electronic car neared, they could see the marks on the red heart lantern. They couldn't understand the Chinese characters at all. Of course, the shooter was the only one who understood, but he could only speak. "Boss, what is this?" The leader didn't answer. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, and a sinister aura overflowed from his eyes. There must be someone here. It wasn't a rabbit just now. Shoot. Before the electronic car could get close, The leader had already raised his gun. With just one shot, the electronic car was flipped over, and the red heart lights flickered. In the jungle, such a color of light was somewhat chilling to look at. Boss. The person who shot the gun opened his mouth again. It was not because of anything else, but because the overturned electronic car had flipped over again. However, the lights were off, and it was quietly parked there, looking a little embarrassed. Someone is controlling it. The leader was not stupid. Go and find that person. Yes. The other two took a step forward. The electronic car moved again. This time, it was moving faster than before. F***CK. As soon as the word shooter came out of his mouth, suddenly, a voice came from the electronic car. Mr. Qin, please unlock the voice password lock. You will have 3 chances. The 5 of them paused, and the expressions on their faces became more colorful. Boss, is this car talking? The leader didn't have time to react. The electronic car made a few more sounds. Countdown to unlock the password begins. You have 10 seconds, 10. The shooter subconsciously waited for it to count to 9. Unexpectedly, the electronic car changed its tone and said lazily, 0. The corner of the shooter's mouth twitched. Was the 10-second countdown eaten by a dog? Sorry, if I don't answer the correct voice in the specified time, I will explode. Sigh, I'm so sad. The electronic car circled around, as if it was really sad. It also seemed that the shot just now had hit its electronic circuit, and the wheels were a little paralyzed. Explode. The shooter didn't think much of it. He raised his hand and shot the electronic car again. Seeing that it didn't react at all, he said, "It's already broken, and it still explodes?" The leader's eyes narrowed deeper and deeper. What's the point of arguing with an electronic car? Go and find this person. Go and find this person who is pretending to be a ghost. Yes. As soon as the shooter finished speaking, he wanted to turn around and leave. However, a loud bang rang out directly from his left side, causing his ears to buzz. The explosion was real. Although it couldn't kill anyone, it was enough to make 2 of the people inside lose their 5 senses for a moment. The remaining 3 cursed and wanted to go forward to drag them away. The one closest to the grass had just taken a step forward when a gust of wind appeared behind him. A gust of wind appeared behind him. Just as he was about to turn around and shoot, his neck was pressed against by someone from behind. Then, a knife cut his throat. It was so straightforward that he couldn't believe that there was such a person behind him. He didn't even have time to look back before the other person let go of his neck. A soft and lazy voice was pressed against his ear, and only one word was said. 1. When did that person appear? Why didn't they feel it at all? And what did he mean by 1? The mercenary wanted to speak, but he could only mutter softly. He pressed against his neck with one hand and stretched the other in front of him. His trachea was cut, and his entire body started to twitch. He wanted them to turn back. It was just that this figure appeared at the right time. The people in front were already focused on the aftermath of the explosion and on their boss, who was affected by it. No one looked behind them. They hadn't expected someone to be so daring, appearing when there were 5 of them. Bojo made use of this time difference. If she had to describe it, it would be like killing someone while being invisible and then retreating after killing someone. Her movements were like flowing water, like a phantom in the night. The moment you felt a sense of danger, it meant that she had already finished killing. Just like what Bojo had said, every hacker was a magician to a certain extent. Magicians were successful because they knew how to divert the audience's attention. The electronic car was a diversion point. The moment it appeared, Bojo started to move in the opposite direction. An ambush. Cutting off the back row. That was what she wanted to do. Chapter 1202. It was just that everyone who fought understood this. Having more people would give them a huge advantage in a real battle. Besides, Bojo was only left with a military dagger. Moreover, to a certain extent, the mercenaries had already sensed that there was someone else in the forest. The sudden explosion had caused the fierce-looking leader to cover his ears and curse in a low voice. He shook his head and pushed away the people who wanted to help him. His eyes were sinister. Find this person. Find this person for me. Boss Carrie he. At this moment, Someone had already noticed the person who was lying on the ground with his limbs twitching. The leader of the group glanced sideways and cursed. Then, he began to fire wildly into the bushes. Bo Jiu rolled quickly. If she had been any slower, she might have been injured by the stray bullets. She turned sideways and used the bushes as cover. Her back was pressed against the tree trunk. There was grass on the tip of her nose. She adjusted her breathing slowly so that she could hide well and find a chance to break through. At this moment, the mercenaries couldn't go to the residential area. They were successfully trapped outside the metal fence and in the forest. Bo Jiu lifted her head and twirled her dagger. She was thinking about what the Almighty would do in such a situation. There were only 4 people left. One of them had been seriously injured. From the angle, he should have lost his hearing. However, his gun was still in his hands. He was a long-range shooter. The other 3 were completely unharmed. The most difficult to deal with was the leader. He was alert, quick and skillful. Most importantly, he was born with a crazy gene. He didn't seem afraid of death at all. While Bo Jiu was thinking about these things, she had to pay attention to her surroundings. Even the slightest movement would mean that someone was approaching. The only advantage she had was the weather in the forest. It was foggy. But how was she going to break through or protect herself from now on? That was going to be difficult for her. A woodcutter couldn't cook without rice. She was defeated because the bullets in her gun weren't real. In the distance, the night sky thickened. When there wasn't any wind, the fog would be especially thick. This was the no man's land. It wasn't safe to enter the forest at this time. The humidity was too high and poisonous snakes would come out. Therefore, the army had a rule that unless there was a military demonstration, no one was allowed to enter except for the garrison personnel. Hence, when the soldier on night duty saw the person walking towards him, his originally bright eyes turned even darker. He clicked his heels together and gave a standard salute. Captain Qin. Even though Qin Mo was now a major general, the people here were used to calling him Captain Qin. Is there any problem? Qin Mo's words caused the soldier to pause. No, everything is normal. Even the infrared is normal. Normal? Qin Mo lifted his lids and looked into the dark night. He frowned again. Give me your backpack and gun. Ha! The soldier didn't understand why Captain Qin wanted his things, but in the military, he had to obey orders. Yes. The soldier untied everything at his waist and handed everything to Qin Mo. He watched as the man tilted his head and adjusted his shooting angle. With a click, he said calmly, "Earpiece." Yes. The soldier didn't expect Captain Qin to even want his wireless earpiece. What was Captain Qin trying to do? Qin Mo took the black earpiece and put it on his left ear. At this moment, he seemed to have heard something. He quickly raised his gun and aimed it at the forest. Who's there? There was someone there? The soldier hadn't reacted. The person's breathing could be heard. It's me, one of us out. The sniper who had fought with Bo Jiu hadn't expected Captain Qin to be stationed here. He paused for a moment before rushing over. His lungs were about to explode from running. When he spoke, his chest rose and fell violently. Captain Qin, something happened. Someone invaded the no man's land. 10 went to chase after them alone. They are heading north. Once they leave the north, they will reach the neighboring regiment and residential area. Qin. Before the sniper could finish his sentence, his shoulder was grabbed by someone with great strength. Who did you say went after him alone? 10. At this moment, the sniper was filled with self-blame. I should have stayed behind with him. He asked me to inform you that those people took many photos of the troops. He also asked me to inform you that both of you have the same USB drive. If the direction is right, you will be able to respond. Qin Mo didn't have time to ask why they didn't bring their earpieces into the no man's land. He also didn't have time to blame anyone because he knew that in order to protect the secret of the base and the national defense checkpoint at the border, he had to ensure that the intruders wouldn't be able to return. One of them had to come back to inform the others while the other pursued. But even though he knew at that moment, his mind was blank. His fingers trembled uncontrollably. Only by gripping his gun tightly could he suppress the uneasiness in his heart. Even Qin Mo didn't notice that his expression was filled with a bloodthirsty aura. The sniper was still talking. But Qin Mo didn't seem to hear him. Until the word USB drive appeared. Qin Mo glanced up. He told himself to calm down. It was at this moment that he had to remain calm. If he wasn't calm, who was going to fetch his little Bojiu back? Qin Mo reached out and pressed his temples. It was too painful. It was so intense that his eyes turned bloodshot. The soldier at the side was frightened by Captain Qin's expression. He had heard that Captain Qin had been kicked out of the military previously because he had been hypnotized by someone. That hypnotization was too scary. Once it was triggered, a person's personality would be too different from before. At that time, the higher-ups had been afraid of this, which was why they had removed Captain Qin's military uniform. But now, the soldier opened his mouth and called out, "Captain Qin." But Qin Mo had already started speaking. "Inform the neighboring troops to use all their forces to stop them. We will conduct a carpet search from the east, west, and south. Think of a way to prevent them from leaving the border. If necessary, snipe them directly." "Yes." The soldier touched his feet. The sniper looked at his captain. He switched on his black earpiece, his voice slightly hoarse. "Take your guns into the forest and lock onto my position. I'll give you 1 minute to follow." Magician was still washing his feet with a towel in his mouth. Hunter was seated beside him. Their topic was basically about how to cover up their captain's relationship. Chapter 1203. Pa. This was the sound of a belt being buckled. Behind his waist was a gun and bullets. Ka. That was stabilizing. His fingers tugged on the jacket of his combat uniform. In the blink of an eye, it was draped over his body. Up until now, the two of them only had 25 seconds. During this time, they didn't forget to raise their hands and aim at the watches on their wrists. Wolf, who had also received the news, tilted his head and started to adjust his rifle. Many people said that if you hadn't been in the military, you wouldn't know how fast they were. Even if they were wearing shoes, it would still be beyond imagination. That was indeed the case. It wasn't just fast, it was the rhythm of their bodies over the years. Other than being fast, their movements were uniform. It was so neat that it was shocking. From the moment they received the order to the moment they arranged everything, Magician and the others only took slightly more than 30 seconds. The next moment, they moved out like wild leopards. At this moment, Qin Mo had already entered the forest. The soldier who was watching Qin Mo's back opened his mouth. He turned to look at the sniper, slightly worried. Will there be any problems? After all, Captain Qin wasn't in a good state. The sniper was relatively calm. It was probably because he had experienced real bullets today. He knew what to do. Follow Captain Qin's instructions. I'll report to the general. In the distance, in the dense forest, there wasn't any wind but the temperature was extremely low. If a person didn't move for a long time in such a situation, they would definitely feel cold. That's right, Bojiu felt cold. When the fog rose, the temperature on the ground would be extremely low. In order to better disguise herself, she blended into the bushes. Her fingers were extremely cold. It could be seen from the color of her lips. But she couldn't care less about the cold. She had to think of a breakthrough because the four of them were already walking towards her. There was another way, which was to lure them into the forest. But that would mean that she would completely lose contact with the military. The information she brought back was from the north. The deeper they went into the forest, the further south they went. Moreover, the south side was the territory of another country. Hence, she couldn't lure them into the forest. Bojiu thought about this. While the fog was still thick and they hadn't reached the forest, she stood up and grabbed onto the tree trunk. She swiftly climbed up the tree. The tree trunk could only be used as a support point. The higher she climbed, the more hidden it would be. But thanks to her quick reflexes, Bojiu managed to react quickly. After the four of them arrived, the first thing they did was to sweep the entire bush. However, the people on the other side still found traces. It was obvious that someone had run over the bushes. These mercenaries weren't stupid, and the leader was especially difficult to deal with. He bent down and touched the fallen grass with his fingers. He narrowed his eyes and smiled at the empty forest as if he was teasing a cornered mouse. Stop hiding. After you left the grass, there were no traces of you around. We didn't hear anyone leaving either, which proves that you haven't left. Since you haven't left, I've scanned the grass. There's no one here, so you must be hiding in the tree. Since you've climbed up the tree, it's not easy to come down. Chapter 1204. The forest was still quiet as though there was no one around. The leader wasn't satisfied with this. He hated it when someone pretended to be mysterious in front of him, especially when it was a little brat from China. An experienced person would be able to determine the size and height of the other party through the pressure of the bushes. The person who could create such a thing wouldn't be very old. But it was such a person who not only disrupted their rhythm, but also killed one of them. The leader's eyes were filled with hatred at the thought of this. Even if he had to leave early, he had to kill the little brat who had disrupted their plans. Do you still want to continue playing hide and seek? The leader smirked. You should be the only one here, right? Let me guess, you don't have any other weapons besides a military knife. Otherwise, you could have used a silencer to shoot from afar when we didn't notice you. It seems like you have no other choice but to risk your life to kill us. As the leader spoke, he raised his gun and shot at the top of one of the trees. With a bang, the leaves scattered and the crows flew away. Not this one. The leader laughed coldly. It's okay, we have bullets. We can take our time to find him. With that, he gestured to the people beside him, one on the left and one on the right. He meant for them to split up. The other three nodded. They were excited about the massacre that was about to begin. From their point of view, if the other party was alone, he would be courting death. He dared to appear in front of them and ruin their plans, killing their people. It seemed like this little brat didn't know what kind of people he was facing. The leader of the group wasn't wrong. They had confirmed the range. Even if there were no less than 30 trees around them, they wouldn't be able to find him in 3 minutes. However, if they really wanted to find him, the 4 of them could find him in 3 minutes. But because of this, they couldn't move recklessly. Because of this, they couldn't move recklessly. But at this moment, suddenly, a military fighter jet flew over the forest. No, it wasn't just one. Other than this one, there was another one in the distance. That was because the fighter jets were breaking through the clouds and flying towards them uniformly. They hovered in the sky in a very large scale, and each of them was terrifyingly elite. There was a distance between them, and they were flying in a triangular formation, bringing with them a sense of deterrence. A total of 7, like iron armor, leapt into the eyes of the mercenaries. The flag of Wuxia was also printed on it, bright red and eye-catching. B-boss. We've been discovered? Someone was so scared that even his voice began to tremble. It wasn't that he didn't have a future, but these infrared fixed-point fighter jets were really too scary. The leader sneered. So what if we're discovered? There's no light above or below us. Do you think they can discover our location? At this moment, the fighter jets issued a warning. You have violated our territory. According to international law, our country has the right to shoot you on the spot. Warning, put down your guns. Boss. One of them panicked. The leader slapped him. Listen carefully, this is just the first warning. According to international law, they can only shoot after 3 warnings, do you understand? Besides, I'll say it again, how far are they from the ground? Do you think they can see us? Idiot! While saying these words, the leader also felt the pressure. He didn't know whose idea it was. Warning them from above? Was it to make them feel afraid? Whose idea was it? Of course it was Qin Mo's. The soldier who was worried about Qin Mo's condition was completely wrong. When it came to Bo Jiao, even if Qin Mo wasn't in a good state, he would force himself to be calmer. He would start from the mentality of the invaders. After entering the forest, he would order the headquarters through the earpiece and send out the fighter jets. This was to make the invaders panic and buy some time. Boss, let's retreat quickly. The person who was called an idiot wasn't bothered at all. He just wanted to escape as soon as possible. The leader was unusually ferocious. Why are we running? There are still 5 trees left. Capture that little brat as a hostage. When we hold him, who knows if he's dead or alive? But the Chinese soldiers are fooled. With a hostage, they will never shoot, understand? Go and find him. Yes. The leader was determined to kill Bo Jiao. Just as he said, there were only 5 trees left. Bo Jiao listened to his words and glanced up at the fighter jets in the sky. She knew this was a sign that the Almighty was coming. Her gaze deepened. She leaned to the left, leaning against the tree trunk. At this moment, she looked down at the tree, her tall nose bridge visible. One of them walked towards her. Just as he was about to reach her tree, Wuxia seemed to have sensed something. She raised her left hand. With a loud swoosh, a military knife appeared, slicing through the fog and stabbing downwards. The person had obviously seen someone on the tree. Just as he was about to raise his gun, the military knife flew over and struck his head. It was a one-hit kill. There weren't any mistakes. Both the angle and the timing were perfect. The smell of fresh blood filled the air. The leader was the first to twist his body, shooting towards the top of the tree. In a flash, the black leather belt in Wuxia's hands came into effect. That was what she had used previously. With a shake, she used the force of the impact to fly towards another tree. Even if her skills were beautiful, it wouldn't be able to eliminate the danger. Her position was completely exposed. Moreover, she had already handed over the military knife on her. Now, it depended on her dodging methods and luck. Wuxia had handed over the military knife because the USB in her pocket had lit up with a red. This meant that the Almighty was within 500 meters. She kicked with her long legs, using the force from the kick to counterattack. This move looked cool and could also help her avoid the bullets to a certain extent. But it was extremely tiring. After flying 3 times, Wuxia's breathing was different from before. There was an obvious rise and fall in her breathing. Chapter 12:05. With that, he was about to rush forward. But the next second, the leader froze. It was not because of anything else, but because the person who was originally walking beside him suddenly fell backward. His fingers were still maintaining his walking posture. His mouth was wide open, and his eyes were still filled with panic and disbelief. But the man had already stopped breathing. There was no warning at all, but there was a muzzle on his forehead. Fresh blood filled the air like a fog. When it rushed to the tip of his nose, the person beside him raised his gun. "Retreat! Retreat!" The leader shouted, his body retreating rapidly. However, there were still people who didn't retreat to a safe position. No, it shouldn't be said that no one retreated to a safe position. The sniper's speed was too fast. The moment the first shot landed, the second followed closely. This time, it wasn't the head but the enemy's heart. There was a loud bang. The other person covered his chest with his hand. His pupils dilated, and the blood on his face quickly faded. The palm of his hand came into contact with a viscous blood. But because of his movement, he was able to keep his life. But that was all. He didn't get shot in the heart, but it still made him lose his ability to move and the blood couldn't stop flowing. The leader saw that in just a few seconds, his 2 subordinates had fallen to the ground, and his expression changed completely. It was as if at this moment, he felt fear. It was fear that came from the bottom of his heart. Because he had never seen a sniper kill 2 people consecutively in such a short period of time and with such high accuracy, even if they were still moving. They weren't moving like ordinary people. Who exactly was it? The leader's chest rose and fell. He leaned against the tree trunk, breathing heavily. The mercenary who wasn't completely dead looked up at him, probably hoping that his boss would pull him over. But under such circumstances, he couldn't go out. That kind of shot followed by the next shot. Just who was it that got hit by the first shot? Only Wuxia, who was standing on the tree, knew who it was. 300 meters away, the figure with a long rifle walked over. He was even faster than her. From top to bottom, his disguise was almost perfect, the same color as the forest. When he raised his gun to aim, he was like a perfect sniper. Smoke lingered around him, shrouding his slender figure, making it difficult for others to see him. But the strange thing was that there was a strange atmosphere around him, especially when he aimed and shot. It was as if a gun had drawn an invisible barrier. That was why there was that saying, once the spear was erected, there would be no one within 800 meters. The leader was smart. He quickly realized that they were going to fail this time. He picked up the phone on the ground and quickly retreated. After the fighter jets locked onto the source of the gunshot, they all flew over like they were patrolling. This made the leader's scalp go numb. Needless to say, the other one's legs were trembling. Boss, what should we do? It seems like we can't escape. There's no need to run. Do you see what's ahead? We're only 1,000 meters away from the border. As long as we get there, even if we're discovered, they won't have the right to catch us. The leader said as he ran forward. The mercenaries ran especially fast. Even though they were in the jungle, they weren't ordinary people. They had a certain level of combat experience and knew how to walk on such a path. Rather than saying they were walking, it was more realistic to say that they were running. But they still had some equipment on them. This really affected their speed. Many of the bombs were thrown behind them in advance to prevent anyone from chasing them from behind. But when the bomb exploded, it also revealed their whereabouts. Bo Jiao held onto the branch and shook her head. She reached out and patted her ears. She continued to use the belt to move forward. There was someone behind them. Even if they were on the tree, it was impossible for them not to notice him. Boss, that soldier keeps following us. A minute, he's like a cockroach. When the leader heard this, a ferocious expression filled his face. Throw the bombs at the tree. Yes. There weren't many bombs left, but it was more than enough to deal with one person. Bo Jiao watched as something flew over. She tilted her body and somersaulted, jumping down from the tree. There was a loud boom. The aftershock of the explosion caused Bo Jiao to lose her balance. She bent one of her knees and rolled along the bushes. Then she stood up quickly. Her movements were fast, so fast that it was dazzling. But if it hadn't been for her skills and reflexes, she might not have been able to dodge the bomb. But Bo Jiao knew that she couldn't hear anything at this moment. The youngster tilted her face and supported herself with one hand on the ground. Her eyes were as bright and deep as the stars. At this point, she already understood the other party's intention. After all, she was a criminal. She would often use all sorts of excuses to explain herself in lawless areas and make the police helpless. In front of them was the exit of the jungle. Once they left this place, they would no longer belong to China. When that time came, they would have to deal with these people according to international rules. Once they followed international rules, the governments of country M and country T would intervene. The criminal would be transferred to their own countries to be judged. When that happened, the whole world would know that China couldn't even defend against a few mercenaries. The deployment of the military would also be exposed. Hence, she had to think of a way to delay these two people. Bo Jiao had already rushed out. She didn't follow behind them. Instead, she went around them. When the person in front saw that the figure didn't follow them, he smiled. It was rare for him to feel a murderous aura at this moment. Boss, it hit. That person should be safe now. Don't forget that there is still a sniper. Until now, we still don't know where he is. The leader didn't slow down at all when he said this. However, there was no sound of flying behind them, which made them feel a lot more relaxed. Especially since the other person didn't have any burdens and didn't need to be on guard against anyone. Just as this thought entered his mind, before it could disperse, he heard the sound of the wind. Suddenly, he heard a gust of wind, and before he knew what it was, he had already been hit. There was a loud clang. Someone used a long spear from the side. The handle of the spear hit his head and he fell to the ground. This time, there was no metal rod. There was also a long spear. Even if there were no bullets, as long as it was a one-on-one fight, it could be extremely explosive. The person who was thrown to the ground couldn't stand up, let alone grab a gun. His entire head was in a daze. The intense pain forced him to lie on the ground, arching his back. Yes, both him and the leader of the people running in front of them. They never expected the soldier who had been following them from the beginning to come out in such a manner. He held a long spear with one hand and his face was covered with a mask. Only his eyes were exposed. The moment he raised his hand, the corners of his eyes shone with the coldness of the night moon. The leader knew that he couldn't turn back to care about anyone. It was useless. There was only one way left, and that was to run. However, what he didn't expect was that the youngster was the one who stopped his men. What stopped him was the red on his forehead that he was aiming at. In an instant, the entire forest seemed to have quietened down. There were no more sounds of running. Only the sounds of insects and breathing could be heard. The leader's fingers froze. He didn't dare to move. Because he knew very well that he had become the opponent's target. If it was an ordinary sniper, the leader wouldn't be afraid. However, after witnessing the scene just now, He might not be able to escape from the opponent's shooting. The sweat on his forehead started to drip down the side of his face and onto the back of his hand. The opponent didn't say a word, but he didn't dare to move forward. His throat moved. He wanted to use a bomb the moment his fingers moved. A voice rang out in the forest. The voice was very faint. It was so faint that it made him widen his eyes. He had heard this voice before. Who do you think is faster, you or me? Until now, the leader still wanted to identify the person's position, but he couldn't. At this moment, he heard the person's voice again. It was a little deep. The words didn't seem to be directed at him. Instead, it seemed like an order was given through the earpiece. 3 o'clock underground, gather the light. In an instant, the lights that should have been lit up when the fighter jets were descending were all shining in this area. The strong light made the leader, who had been in the forest for 7 to 8 hours, subconsciously cover his eyes. Even the youngster in the distance narrowed her eyes. She pulled up her mask and turned her face to the left. The light grew brighter and brighter. When the leader got used to it, he realized that he was already surrounded. The fighter jets in the sky were all aiming at him. The leader's throat moved. He knew that the real reason he couldn't escape was because of the sniper in front of him. If it wasn't for the infrared lock in his command, these fighter jets wouldn't have been able to discover him. He wouldn't have frozen there for 10 seconds. At this moment, the leader saw the sniper's figure clearly. That's right, it was just his figure. Because he walked out from the light. Standing against the light, he couldn't make out his facial features at all. He just held the rifle in one hand and walked over with the aura. The leader's arm stiffened again. Then, he saw a pair of eyes that seemed to reflect all the light in the world. Chapter 1206. It was really him. The leader had never imagined that he would meet this person. But those light brows and deep eyes all indicated that it was indeed him. All the mercenaries were retired from the previous armies of various countries. Back then, there had been a training for the top talents of the military in the Amazon. The leader had been a member of the M government back then. He had met Qin Mo then. Of course, he didn't know Qin Mo's name. He only knew his code name. Young Master. This person had defeated the military talents of the various countries. When he had won glory for the country, he hadn't even been in second place. The leader had tasted Qin Mo's prowess. But all these years, he had never heard of this codename in any of the military units in China. Moreover, there were rumors that this person had been eliminated by the organization he was currently in. Hence, the leader had never felt that there was anything to be afraid of. Now, when he saw that person, even his back was stiff. The people on the destroyer started to descend, surrounding him in the middle. Capture him alive. The person only said 2 words, but it made the leader's hair stand on end. He couldn't imagine what would happen to him if he landed in the hands of this person. Did Kawang know that this person had returned? It was obvious that Kawang didn't know. The news he received was that Qin Mo had been kicked out of the military and the hypnosis hadn't been removed. The military wouldn't allow a person with hypnosis to carry out a mission. Under normal circumstances that would be the case. If it wasn't for the fact that this matter was too difficult to deal with and for the sake of safety, Qin Mo wouldn't have returned. But this was based on Qin Mo's own will. Kawang would probably never understand. In Wuxia, there were some people who were born to protect. One was the Tang family and the other was the Qin family. Those responsibilities and burdens had already been engraved into their bones. Whenever we're needed here, we'll be there. This was what a young major general with the surname Tang had said a long time ago when he was filling out his retirement report. It was the same for Qin Mo. Even Kawang couldn't understand it, much less the leader. Everything had ended. The operation had been successful. There weren't any casualties. This was the news from this side. The next team was different. When they were searching the forest, they found 2 corpses. It was these 2 people that stopped the mercenaries from crossing the defense line. Being stationed at the dangerous border was a kind of bravery in itself. Because those who had never been there would never understand what kind of mentality they had and what kind of harsh environment they had overcome in order to hold on to this inch of land. The leader was dragged onto the fighter jet by the special forces. Qin Mo lifted his eyes and looked at the person who was still standing beside the tree. He called out twice in a row, but the person did not respond. Instead, he tilted his head and patted his ears. Qin Mo leaped over, his eyes still red. Without a word, he cupped the youngster's face, his voice low. "Your ears are ringing from the explosion?" Bo Jiao couldn't hear his words, but she could read his lips. She nodded and wanted to slap him again. However, her hand was grabbed by the Almighty. With his free hand, he reached out to touch her ear. This one. Her instincts told her that the Almighty wasn't in his right state. His eyes were bloodshot and this wasn't his usual self. That was indeed the case. Sometimes, the more a profiler forced himself to analyze and write calmly, the more pressure he had to endure. Every time he did a profiling, it would take a lot of effort to analyze everyone's route and the other party's method. This was the image that Qin Mo had already sketched in his mind. But even so, he was worried that he would make a mistake. If he made a mistake, the price he would have to pay would be her. Bo Jiao felt the grip on her wrist tightening. The other hand was caressing her ear gently, his voice low. "What about now, can you hear me?" "Buzz." Bo Jiao felt that it was time to get closer to him. Hence, she leaned closer. Qin Mo stilled, not saying a word. When no one was looking, Bo Jiao lowered her voice. "Perhaps a kiss will make it better." This time, Qin Mo smiled, the blood in his eyes fading. "A kiss will make it better?" "Yes," Bo Jiao replied seriously. Qin Mo's fingers rubbed the ear again. His voice became as deep as the night. "I'm scared." Bo Jiao hadn't expected to hear this. She froze. Qin Mo watched her, his gaze hiding too many things. "What if I don't arrive on time?" Bo Jiao felt that it was time for her to say something. Just as she was thinking about it, the hand on her ear left and the grip on her wrist tightened. "Captain Qin." A patrolling soldier walked over and saluted. "Clean up, we found all the phones and the guns." "Got it." Qin Mo's voice was calm. "Inform the troops, someone is injured." The patrolling soldier. Someone was injured? Where? This wasn't something he could ask. He could only contact the medical department immediately after receiving the order. Very quickly, he lifted his head. The doctor asked about the specific situation. Where's the injury in the lungs? Does he need surgery and how is the blood loss? Temporary tinnitus caused by the explosion. The patrolling soldier wasn't the only one who froze. Even the doctor who received the call felt his mouth twitch. "Boss, are you kidding me? Why did he have to inform him about a tinnitus?" He was an authoritative person. Be it psychology or surgery, he was the best of the best. And now, he had to treat a temporary tinnitus. The person with the code name doctor wanted to say something. As usual, Qin Mo didn't give him a chance to speak. He brought Bo Jiao onto the plane. The patrolling soldier was on the same plane as well. He took the opportunity when Captain Qin turned on his Bluetooth earpiece to make the final report. He lowered his voice. "Boss, the injured person isn't you, right?" Bo Jiao lifted her head and looked at the curve of the plane, her posture lazy. "It should be." The patrolling soldier paused. "But can't you hear me? What happened to the tinnitus?" Bo Jiao tilted her head, her gaze devilish. "Youngster, you are still too young." She had made a mistake. If she didn't pretend to be sick, the Almighty would punish her to stand facing the wall. But Bo Jiao hadn't expected that her tinnitus would cause her to be treated like a level 1 disabled person. This time, she was probably famous in the military. It could be seen from the shock in the patrolling soldier's eyes. Bo Jiao thought that was the end of the shock. But unexpectedly, when they alighted from the plane, the Almighty suddenly carried her up. Bo Jiao hugged his neck instinctively. The next second, she fell into his embrace, her face rubbing against his. His soft skin and the curve of his face, along with the faint smell of gunpowder. The patrolling soldier wasn't just shocked. Instead, he looked as though it was the end of the world. Hunter and magician, who had been waiting for a long time, widened their eyes. After all, when they saw this scene, they couldn't describe how they felt. The doctor frowned and asked, "What's this?" "Carried?" When had their boss carried anyone before? "An injured person." The two indifferent words were heard, and the straight men on the other side heaved a huge sigh of relief. So it was an injured person. Captain Qin still cared about them occasionally. This was the reaction of the soldiers. When Hunter and Magician heard the two words, they glanced at each other before shifting their gazes away. This was a good explanation. The doctor's lips twitched. "Boss, explain to me. What kind of injured person with tinnitus needed to be carried into the infirmary?" But the others weren't paying attention to this. Every soldier stationed here only knew one thing, and that was that their operation had succeeded. In the past, there had been people who felt that recruit number 10 wasn't very powerful and that everything was just luck. But now, such voices were gone. This was because they all knew how dangerous it was to stalk someone without any ammunition, or even to fight with them. They were gambling with their lives. If the youngster hadn't been there, they wouldn't have known about this invasion. Even if they had known, they wouldn't have been able to eliminate them at the best time. No one would forget this point. Number 10 was worthy of that military uniform. He was even more outstanding than them. Due to the severity of the situation, the general and regiment commander took the military plane together and sent all the information to Jiang City at the first instance. From all aspects, it was confirmed that the mercenaries were Kawang's subordinates. And through the sniper's brief recount, it was confirmed. They wanted to let China know how they would take revenge if they cut off their source of income. After seeing the photos and the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves, the higher-ups immediately issued an order to wipe out all places related to the drug. Especially in the border cities between the three countries, they received heavy news. Once the poisonous powder appeared in the market, the relevant departments would be held responsible. Entertainment venues would be on the lookout too. Any channels and individuals would be punished. Once the drug addicts were discovered, they would be detained. No matter who they were or what connections they had, it would be useless. In an instant, it was different from the past. Because those who were sacrificed couldn't be allowed to die in vain. In this world, especially in China, there would always be a group of people risking their lives to deal with the most ruthless drug lords. They wanted to clean up a piece of land. No one knew what harm this thing could bring to people. It wasn't just something that killed people. It was something that could turn a person into something neither human nor ghost. Choosing to enter the field of narcotics was equivalent to having one foot in the coffin. Some people were even willing to go undercover in order to find out how they operated. It was to prevent these things from flowing into the country. Perhaps, those who chose to forgive the drug addicts had never thought that there were other people using their lives to protect this land. In order to prevent their country from being seen as weak. In order to ensure that the people who left the country would always remember that no matter when or what they encountered outside, there would always be a strong shield behind them. It was a pity that not everyone could understand it. The sky outside turned darker. After the success of the operation, the troops became even quieter. Because they really needed a good sleep. In terms of garrison, there were twice the number of soldiers. The biggest change was in the area of garrison. It extended another 1,000 meters. Regardless of how many families lived at the other end of the no man's land, there might not even be 7 or 8 herdsmen. There were still garrison soldiers and hidden sentries protecting the area. Everyone's morale wasn't very high. Even if something didn't happen to their troops, it was the people from the neighboring regiment. Usually, they didn't like each other during military demonstrations, but they didn't expect this to happen. The doctor who was doing a psychological test with a pen also realized that after this incident, some soldiers were not suitable to stay. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that as a doctor, he was actually chased out. And he was chased out from the infirmary. He scratched his face with the pen. Why were there mosquitoes in this weather? The doctor in the white coat was really pitiful. Squatting outside the door, what else could he do? He could only find another place to sleep. However, there was one thing that he was concerned about. He had heard from the sniper that before his boss entered the forest, he wasn't in a good state. Indeed, something wasn't right. When the doctor saw his boss for the first time, he noticed that his eyes were bloodshot. That was related to his head and mental state. This meant that before this, his boss's head must have been hurting to a certain extent. But why was he still so calm? The entire unit, including General Qin, was worried. Once his boss couldn't take it, what would he do? During the mission, he would recall the past and his head would hurt so much that he couldn't hold his gun. He was the soul of the entire unit. If he made a mistake, the mission wouldn't be completed. However, today, the doctor turned back to take a look. He muttered to himself subconsciously, "It's not that it doesn't hurt. Rather, compared to the pain, there's someone important waiting for him." That's why he forced himself to calm down. He even forgot about the pain. He remembered what his former mentor had said. Don't underestimate Qin. His mental state was so strong that it was scary. It was indeed scary. However, it was scary that wouldn't hurt anyone. This was probably the reason why they trusted their boss so much. No matter how many years had passed or what he had been through, he had never changed. Except for the fact that he was abusing dogs. The doctor adjusted his white coat again. He decided not to look for trouble anymore. At this moment, the lights in the entire unit were turned off. Even the light in the infirmary was illuminated by a large flashlight. When it shone on the young man on the sickbed, there was an indescribable haze to it. Chapter 1207. Qin Mo stood beside the bed, pouring a cup of hot water for a certain someone. His eyes met the jade-like curve. His gaze deepened. Then he raised his hand and drank a mouthful of water. Bojo paused. "Brother Mo, isn't that water for me?" It was. After Qin Mo finished the water, he placed the cup at the side and bent down, his fingers touching her ear lightly. The unusual coldness made Bojo take a step back, her head leaning against the wall. "What is it?" "I'm checking to see if you're better," he said, his fingers caressing her left ear. Bojo thought to herself, how could she admit that she was better now? At the very least, she had to wait for the night. She laughed, stretching lazily. "Brother Mo, what did you say? I can't hear you clearly." "I'm not sure." His lips curled up, and that handsome and elegant face came closer to her. When his thin lips parted, she could see that beautiful curve, and he was very leisurely. A kiss landed on the tip of her ear. Bojo's heart trembled. "Hey, the Almighty, this is against the rules." She reached out, wanting to push him away. It wouldn't be good if someone entered. This was the infirmary after all. "What is it?" He pressed her wrist and leaned his lips against her ear. His breath seemed to be able to envelop her completely. "It's not like a kiss can make it better." He was using her words against her again. Bojo interlocked her fingers with his. "This is the infirmary. Did she make herself clear?" "Oh." Qin Mo dragged his voice, his unique voice carrying a hint of elegance. "Our sugar daddy is afraid of being seen too." Bojo pretended to not hear what he was saying. She had to be thorough in her act. Qin Mo chuckled, inching closer. "Do you think it's a coincidence that we're the only ones here?" "Of course not, that's why I have to act sick. Almighty, you haven't been yourself since the start." Bojo didn't continue the topic. Instead, she reached out and held onto his head with enough strength to fight another round. But in front of the Almighty, she rubbed it lightly, her brows still furrowed. "Are you jealous because of your headache?" Qin Mo stilled, his pupils dilating in an instant. Then, he returned to his original state, his smile overflowing. Compared to a head massage, there's something else that relieves the pain faster. He looked at her. His gaze was as deep as the night outside, causing Bojo to freeze. The next second, the flashlight seemed to have run out of power, and the surroundings were plunged into darkness. Bojo was about to turn on the flashlight, but his aura was already one step closer, pressing down on her. Then, he whispered in her ear, "The way you look in the hospital gown makes me want to do something." Before Bojo could open her mouth, he lifted her chin and pressed his lips down. His lips were soft and lingering, carrying the scent of tobacco. It was a light kiss, soft and cool to the touch. It reminded her of peppermint candy. However, the more time passed, the more intense the kiss became. He sucked on the tip of her tongue until it was numb. Their fingers were interlocked, but when Bojo exerted force, he chuckled lowly. After he released her, his lips were still pressed against hers. "Do you like it?" In the night, Qin Mo was like a demon from the deep sea. Even his voice was lazy and sexy, heating her up. On top of that, he was very different today. "I've always wanted to do something like this, even when I close my eyes." As expected, "We shouldn't be staying in the same room." That kind of voice, while ringing in her ear, at the same time, it lightly pecked the back of her ear. Bo Jiu felt her blood heating up. She moved her left hand, which was interlocked tightly, as though that was the only way to give herself some strength. Brother Mo. MH. Qin Mo didn't intend to let her get up. He followed her wishes and let go of her hand. However, he held onto her wrist and let her wrap her arms around his neck. They sat facing each other. Since Qin Mo's legs were too long, half of them hung down from the side of the bed. But even so, Bo Jiu felt as though she wasn't sitting on the bed, but in the Almighty's arms. They were too close, as though he was using his legs to support a certain area, and she was in that area. This is weird. Bo Jiu lowered her voice, her breath landing on his shoulder. The dark brown uniform was very seductive. Qin Mo tilted his head, smiling more than usual today. I want to touch the person I like in my arms. What's so weird about that? He used the word touch. Seriously. Bo Jiu arched a brow, about to say something. Just then, she felt her hospital gown being lifted from the back. Immediately after, a hand slid in, carrying a slight chill. Bo Jiu shivered, her fingers gripping his shirt tightly. Brother Mo. Qin Mo lowered his voice. Don't hide. Let me know you're really here. Bo Jiu's heart softened. She tilted her head, rubbing her face against his shoulder. 1 minute. They were in the military after all. She hadn't understood before, but now she understood. It wouldn't be good if others found out about it. Bo Jiu didn't care about anything else. She was just worried about how others would view him. Fortunately, the Almighty was cooperative today, replying lazily, All right, 1 minute. Unfortunately, the minute was longer than she had expected. Besides, she could feel the heat around her rising. It was all because of the Almighty's actions. It wasn't a big deal if his hand was restless. It was just that this person had broken too many rules since he was born. Not only his appearance, but even when you closed your eyes, that voice was as pleasant as the late-night CV of a radio station. After it was softened, it was very magnetic and pleasant to listen to. Have I ever told you that this part of yours is very beautiful? Qin Mo spoke, pressing down on her tailbone. The numbness spread uncontrollably throughout her body. She straightened her back instinctively, trying to avoid the touch. Even the corners of her eyes were red, making the mole at the bottom of her eyes seem to be coated with a layer of luster. Qin Mo's gaze deepened. And your back as well. Under the moonlight, the two figures on the hospital bed could be seen clearly. Especially that pair of hands with jade-like joints. Like an art, they wandered around the young man's fair back. With every word, his fingertips would press down a little. Bo Jiu couldn't even stabilize her breathing. All she could feel were his hands and the rising temperature. Every time he pressed down, she couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 1208. All of a sudden, Bo Jiu's shoulders trembled, her face flushing furiously. Itchy. Really? Itchy? Qin Mo's eyes seemed to be watery under the moonlight. Is it just itchy? Even though it was Bo Jiu, she had no choice but to bend her body in his arms. That was probably the only way she could hold on for a minute. Qin Mo felt that she would probably never know that the more she behaved like this, the more he didn't want to leave. It was as though he was possessed. That kind of touch was as smooth as silk, but much softer than silk. It had a good feel, just like the warm jade of ancient times. And the smell on her body. Qin Mo tilted his head, the tip of his nose brushing against her hair, his gaze deepening. Bo Jiu bit her lips. 2 of the buttons on her hospital gown were undone, revealing her exquisite collarbone and slightly round breasts. Her snow-white skin only served to make the temperature hotter in the dark night. She didn't know how the Almighty was feeling. Bo Jiu could only hear her own heartbeat. It was loud. She had never sweated so much before. As her fingers tightened, she unconsciously released her lips. Even her voice was faint and sweet. This minute wasn't a good one for Qin Mo, but it seemed like this was the only way he could confirm that she was still there. Bo Jiu calmed her breathing. After looking at Qin Mo for a moment, she turned her hand and pressed him onto the bed. Brother Mo, something isn't right. Look at me, aren't I here? MMH. Qin Mo raised his hand, his fingertips caressing her face. At the start, she hadn't been pleasing to the eye, but the more he looked at her, the more he liked her. She was still so disobedient. Bojo leaned over with the help of the moonlight. I'm here. Qin Mo watched their posture. Are you going to talk to me like this? Bojo replied before kissing his lips devilishly. You don't have to use any other methods to confirm my presence. I'll just tell you. Qin Mo met her eyes. The moonlight shone on her snow-white shoulders, her hospital gown slipping down to her arms. The sight of her made his throat tighten. Idiot. Qin Mo's lips parted slightly. He pressed her head against his chest and closed his eyes slowly. Bojo moved her fingers. The low voice came again. My head hurts. Especially when I knew that you were chasing after someone. My head felt like it was going to explode. He did not know why. Bojo felt a sense of grievance when she heard that faint voice in the middle of the night. What about now? Bojo moved upwards, reaching out to hug his head. Qin Mo paused. He didn't speak at first, but after a while he said, It's all right. Bojo saw his sexy thin lips and pursed them slightly. Her heart melted from his cuteness. Sundara. Sundara. This was the Almighty. Just like a little princess. Then let me tell you a story, Brother Mo. When Bojo had been young, she had hoped that one day, she would be the one to read him bedtime stories. If not, how would she know her position in the family? Chapter 1209. Bojo. She must have been in a fake relationship, otherwise, her dark history wouldn't have been exposed. Not these two. Qin Mo continued leisurely. Then it's the ancient transmigration, dominating the princes and princes? Seriously, it was ruining the atmosphere. Bojo leaned forward, planting a light kiss on his lips. It was soft. Qin Mo laid there, unable to hold it in any longer. He lifted the corners of his lips, trying to suppress the smile in his eyes. He couldn't hide it since he was kissed. Bojo smiled along with him. Inexplicably. This was probably the opposite of himself after falling in love. Her left hand was pulled over. Their fingers interlocked. Next, they changed their position. He probably felt tired because he wrapped his arm around her back after lying flat, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. Sleep. Bojo felt that she hadn't started to display her talent. Brother Mo, I'm good at telling stories too. Little Bojo. Qin Mo opened his eyes, his voice slow. You can choose to tell your story, but I'll make sure you can't get off the bed. Bojo paused, breaking into a smile. It's so hard to endure. Are you asking for a beating? Qin Mo placed his chin on the youngster's head, closing his eyes once more, his lashes so long they looked like a silhouette. Bojo couldn't see Qin Mo's face. She could only feel his breathing and heartbeat. It wasn't stable, but it was controlled. Even in such a sleeping position, he was still holding onto her hand, but not as forcefully as before, just hugging her naturally. That seemed to be the case. When this man became gentle, he would let you see the entire galaxy. Bojo wanted to tell the story after the mission. It could be used as a proposal. Even though it was a pity that the electronic car was gone, but that was what Bojo was thinking. But when she glanced sideways, she realized that there seemed to be something glowing at the side of his pants pocket. The light was very weak and it must have been in his pocket before, so she couldn't see it. But now it had slipped out. Bojo recognized it immediately. It was her electronic car accessory, the little peach. There were 4 small words written on it. Marry me. Brother Mo. Bojo wanted to say something, but when she turned, she realized that he was really asleep. It was probably because he was too tired that he fell asleep in such a short time. This face always gave people the feeling that when he closed his eyes, he looked like an immortal, but when he opened his eyes, he looked like a demon. It was rare to see a great god so quiet. Bojo reached out and touched his cheek. He seemed to have sensed someone touching him, but the touch was familiar. He didn't wake up, instead, he leaned closer to her. Bojo smiled, lowering her voice. Little princess. Even the little princess was hers. Are all people in love the same? Sometimes, even though he knew that it wasn't appropriate to make it public, it wasn't appropriate to do intimate actions. He just wanted to show off to the whole world. This man was hers. But as for the title of little princess, when he woke up the next day, the sky outside was still not completely bright. Bo Jiu opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the Almighty's face and his arched brow. What did you say to me last night? Chapter 12:10. Little Princess? Qin Mo smiled. The curve of his lips was higher than ever, but there wasn't any warmth in his voice. Bo Jiu wished it was just a dream. She looked at the Almighty again. He was still handsome, but he was so handsome that it made her feel uneasy. When she woke up, she even stopped yawning. She really wanted to knock herself out so that she could start all over again. You heard wrongly. Bo Jiu replied with a straight face. Brother Mo, I said I like you. Qin Mo pinched her face lightly as though he was praising her. You're really good. With such a good sugar daddy, he definitely wouldn't mind if you put on extra weight when you run. Bo Jiu. He said so much, but in reality, she was going to be punished again. Or do you prefer to reflect on your mistakes? Qin Mo expressed his democracy. Bo Jiu arched a brow. If you let me choose, I want to hug you back to sleep. Do you know what I like the most about you? Qin Mo kissed the person in his arms, his fingers caressing her hair gently. Bo Jiu was curious. What is it? I like dreaming. Qin Mo freed his hand and patted the youngster's face, a faint smile on his face. After 7 p.m., go to the training ground and run 10 laps with weights. Bo Jiu felt that the Almighty was using his position to take revenge. Wasn't the nickname Little Princess rather cute and suited to him? Why was he asking her to run again? But 10 laps wasn't much. She could just head to the canteen for her meal after running. That was what Bo Jiu thought at the training ground. But in Prince's eyes, it wasn't the case. Brother, I understand you. This was Prince's first sentence. Bo Jiu ignored him. But your brother seems scarier than my uncle. He's the devil. How did he train his aura? Right, did you know that when you were in the forest yesterday, he went in alone with a gun? F***ck. He mobilized the troops from both sides to coordinate with his commands. How much is in that brain of his? It's too heaven-defying. Also, his shooting range was so far away and there was fog in the forest. How did he distinguish the movements of the people? Seriously, are all the children in your family genetically like that? Bo Jiu wanted to remind him to shut up and look behind him. Finally, the figure came closer. Bo Jiu had already given up on reminding him. Instead, she held the mineral water bottle in her hand and moved a meter away from him. Prince seemed to have noticed her actions and was about to say something when Bo Jiu stopped him. Just then, a cold voice came from behind him. What kind of child our family will give birth to is between us. Prince had completely lost his ability to think because of that voice. Otherwise, anyone would be able to understand the rich information that was conveyed in that sentence. For example, Bo Jiu. Even the calm and devilish Bo Jiu almost choked on the water she was drinking. Why did she end up on such a topic? Chapter 12:11. The villain in Prince's heart was still trembling. He had wanted to reach out and grab his roommate so that he could put in a good word for him. However, the moment he turned, he realized that they were so far apart. F***ck. When did the friendship in the military become so fragile? Qin Mo noticed his actions. He lifted the corner of his lips slowly. The chief should have told you not to go to the forest in the future. Have you ever thought about why? Prince was confused. That's right, he wanted to know why his uncle would care about him going to the forest. You have a bright future. Qin Mo turned towards Bo Jiu. Now, there's one more person to run with you. Bo Jiu was still drinking the mineral water. Did the Almighty want a child? Prince was starting to feel hopeless. He was a nouveau riche, but now, he was going to die in the hands of the devil. Yet, every time he saw him, he would feel a sense of fear. Bo Jiu was still deep in thought. Qin Mo walked over, his gloved hand taking the mineral water from her hands. Prince had expected to see the devil continue punishing people with a faint smile. Unexpectedly, the devil didn't do anything. Instead, he raised his head and drank a mouthful of water. When Qin Mo did this, the sunlight shone down on his face. The curve of his neck was elongated and his throat was glowing. Qin Mo was probably the only person who could look so handsome while drinking water. His action had successfully attracted the attention of the hunter who was following him. In that instant, he felt as though he was going blind. After his boss finished drinking, he returned the mineral water. He seemed to be acting naturally. Hunter remembered the times when they had trained together. Whenever they got too close to their boss, he would knock their heads. Now, they were drinking from the same bottle. Moreover, his boss had brought a glass with him. His boss had gone over because he saw recruit number 10 drinking water. He had even left his own glass at the side. Instead of drinking his premium pu'er, he had gone to drink a cold mineral water. Was it just for an indirect kiss? F***ck. Why did he have to be so smart at such a time? Hunter hugged his head. When their boss was in a relationship, he really didn't care about the feelings of single dogs like them. Prince, who was standing at the side, frowned. Wasn't the devil's actions a little too intimate? Two people drinking a bottle of mineral water? Because they are cousins? Prince wanted to run away immediately. After all, the devil had glanced at him after drinking the water. But before he could take a step, he heard the voice from the other side again. Still have tinnitus? Prince was shocked. Even the devil could speak in such a tone? Bo Jiu took the mineral water and shook her head. She glanced at the bottle in her hand. Did the Almighty finish it? What will she drink later? I'll bring you some water later. Qin Mo tapped her wrist. Continue running. Bo Jiu felt that the moment she looked at his hands, she would be reminded of what had happened last night. She couldn't help blushing, but she couldn't help smiling. Qin Mo had already left. On the other side, Bo Jiu couldn't suppress her laughter. Prince ran towards his roommate. F***ck. Your brother treats you well. He even gave you water. But he punished you and then gave you water. What's going on? Bo Jiu tilted her face and ran over. She was extremely handsome. She asked slowly, You haven't been in a relationship before, right? Prince had entered the military at a young age and had trained his muscles. He really hadn't been in a relationship before. But why did she look at him as though he was a senior telling her something? Forget it. A single person like you wouldn't understand. The youngster whistled and continued running. There was a hint of laughter in her voice. Prince. What's the meaning of being ridiculed for no reason? Because of what had happened last night. There would definitely be a lot of meetings. Other than that, the training for the new recruits had added jungle training. Moreover, each of them was wearing a Bluetooth headset, which could not be taken off during normal training. They would roll out of the mud and swiftly pass through the obstacles. They would use their fastest speed to shoot at the moving animals. Under the aerial view of the military plane, the green army beneath their feet could be seen. When the troops were tired, they would sing military songs. Even though their faces were stained with mud, when they sang, everyone's voices were very strong. Soldiers didn't know how to entertain themselves. However, being at the border meant that there were limited entertainment options. They couldn't communicate. Even if they made a call, they would only do so during festivals. The more important the mission, the more they couldn't contact their families. In the past, Bo Jiu and these people were separated by a layer of fog. Regardless of how her pet had told her when she was young, she had only vaguely understood. After interacting with them, she finally understood where his self-control and resistance to pressure came from. These soldiers belonged to him. When he wasn't on a mission, he was in charge of their training. When they were on a mission, he carried their lives on his shoulders. Looking at the slender figure standing in the middle of the distance, he turned his head to light a cigarette. Occasionally, he would sing a line or two with the soldiers beside him. He still looked noble, but he would joke with his subordinates. When his thin lips curled up, the crimson leaves fell on his military uniform. Yet he could suppress all the colors. Bo Jiu lowered her head. **T. She was done for. She was starting to like the Almighty more and more. What should she do? Prince didn't understand why his dorm mate had lowered her head halfway through the song. What's wrong? I'm afraid I'll be impulsive, so I'm suppressing it. Bo Jiu turned her head. She was seated, placing her hands on her knees lazily. Prince was confused. Impulsive? I want my family, Bojo replied mischievously. Prince was scared out of his wits. Was this child's brain damaged from the explosion in the forest? It's a pity, Bojo muttered. Of all the occasions. Prince looked at her gaze and thought that she was talking about him. His expression was one of shock. You don't tell me you've fallen for me? If that's the case, I'll be honest with you. I've been straight my entire life. Goddess *****. In order not to feel awkward during missions in the future, you better give up, okay? Bojo arched a brow and glanced at him. Who gave you that confidence? Who are you referring to? F****. It's worse if it's someone else. Prince lowered his voice, afraid that he would affect the singing. He reached out and pointed. Everyone here is a guy. You said you want your family? F****. You said you want your family. F****. You said you miss your family. Let me tell you, if it's me, I can help you hide it. If it's someone else, you'd better give up. If your brother finds out, he'll definitely break your legs. Let me tell you. As the captain of the small team, Hunter would definitely be standing at the side. It was inevitable that he would hear Prince's words. He couldn't help but look up at the sky. He didn't know if number 10 would get his legs broken by his boss. But he was sure that his boss would definitely break his legs. Child, didn't you notice that when you were whispering to number 10, your boss's gaze swept past you a few times? He felt a chill down his spine as he stood at the side. How did Prince dare to get any closer? Qin Mo's gaze swept over to them. It seemed like his little friend had a good relationship with her roommate. It was really good. Qin Mo smiled. The hunter felt a chill run down his spine as he witnessed the scene with his own eyes. His boss's smile was a little scary. After the singing session, the doctor suggested a report in the morning in order to ease the anxiety of some of the new recruits. It was probably to let them play some games. Physical games weren't something to be underestimated. It was indeed a way to relieve stress. Moreover, there were rewards. Everyone was eager to participate. At this moment, there wasn't a hierarchy. They could be partners. When Prince heard that there was a reward, he turned and asked Bojo, "Do you want to form a team?" Yes. Bojo was someone who had to get a reward. From a certain perspective, it wasn't unreasonable for them to be able to chat so well. The game was simple. Two people's legs were tied and there was a distance of 800 meters between them. The team that reached the other side first would dismantle the gun and reload the gun. The team that used the least time would be the winner. Prince patted his chest. I'm good at this. Dismantle the gun. Bojo arched a brow. Prince was delighted. I'm talking about jumping with one leg. Didn't I tell you that I'm good at everything? When we have holidays, I'll bring you to play online games. Then, you'll know that I'm better than most people in terms of gaming. Bojo arched a brow, replying slowly, If you're on the other side, I'll play with you. Why? Prince didn't understand. When the youngster bent down, her black hair covered her fringe. Her long fingers caressed the rope, her tone indifferent. That way, I can send you back to the blood pool. Prince was a little slow before he understood what she meant. Hey, we're teammates, don't you understand? Teammates should be. He didn't manage to say the word love. That familiar tall figure appeared again. This time, Prince told himself not to hold it in. This was a game and he was having a normal conversation with his teammate. That's right. Hold it in. Bojo lowered her head, tying the rope around her legs. Suddenly, a pair of hands appeared in front of her. They were long and fair, with jade-like joints. The hands hooked onto the other end of the rope. It was a beautiful knot, fast and orderly. Bojo glanced up. She saw Qin Mo bending down just like her. With the rope tied around her ankles, the distance between them wouldn't be far. If her chin was just a little closer, she would be able to touch his black hair. He smelled good, a unique tobacco scent. Most importantly, because everyone was doing the same thing. Therefore, even if they did this, no one would notice. Of course, that was except for Prince, who couldn't describe his emotions. If he was not mistaken, the great Demon King had just taken the rope that belonged to him, right? After Qin Mo was done tying his own, he turned and tied the ankle of the youngster who had paused. We'll be in the same group. It was a very light sentence, and the voice sounded very normal. Bo-Jio glanced at her roommate. She felt that it was better to mention him. Prince. He's playing as well? As Qin Mo spoke, he glanced in Prince's direction. There wasn't any emotion in between his brows. It was just an indifferent glance, and even the corners of his eyes were curved. But the coldness in his eyes allowed Prince to understand the warning. He hurriedly expressed his stance, his tone sincere. No, I'm not interested in such games. Qin Mo chuckled. He turned towards Bo-Jio. Did you hear that? What else could Bo-Jio say? She couldn't understand why her roommate had changed so quickly. Prince watched the two of them. His heart was thumping furiously. He was scared out of his wits. He could still feel the lingering warmth of the devil. He took another step back and turned towards his captain. Who should I be in the same group? Hunter finally found a chance to talk to his subordinate. Anyone is fine as long as it isn't number 10. With that, he reached out and patted Prince's shoulder. Prince muttered, "You can't blame me. I just realized that the devil is obsessed with his brother, Hunter." On the other side, the two of them were still stretching. It was a normal stretch, but the Almighty's movements were much better than hers. Bo-Jio glanced at him and suddenly felt that his height was a huge disadvantage. What is it? Qin Mo seemed to have sensed her gaze as he tilted his head over. Bo-Jio asked, "Do the troops sell milk?" "Not at the moment," Qin Mo replied casually. "Do you think you're short?" Bo-Jio smiled. "I'm not short. Based on the length of your legs, your speed won't be too fast." Qin Mo replied leisurely, "Short legs." Bo-Jio. She wanted to give the Almighty a beating. It was as though she could see their future. Novels were indeed lies. How could a sharp-tongued man improve after falling in love? How had the Almighty changed? He was still so arrogant that she wanted to challenge him. "Don't pout." Qin Mo glanced at the youngster, his voice coming over again. "It makes me want to kiss you." The sudden flirtation. Bo-Jio arched a brow. "Based on the length of your legs, kissing isn't convenient. 12 centimeters, the golden height for kissing. What's the inconvenience?" Qin Mo reached out to put on the wrist guard. He glanced up at her. "It's probably because my legs are short." Bo-Jio handed her wrist over, a smile on her face. She realized that the Almighty was the one who had helped her put on everything she owned. At this point, it seemed like something a boyfriend would do. Qin Mo chuckled lightly as he helped the youngster put on the wrist guard. They spoke softly. It was a rare moment of intimacy. It was a pity it wasn't long, just a few sentences. The Almighty was too eye-catching. Even though they were wearing the same training uniform, many people still noticed him because of his face. Captain Qin is participating too? It can't be? What's the point? Captain Qin will definitely win. I thought Captain Qin didn't participate in such activities in the past? Cries of anguish rang out from all directions. Bo-Jio glanced over, lowering her voice. Brother Mo, why didn't you participate in such games in the past? In the past. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket. He stood tall, his voice unhurried. I'm not with my girlfriend, why should I participate? What he meant was that he was participating this time to accompany his girlfriend. Bo-Jio paused, her face burning. She shook her ankle and glanced at the person beside her. In the end, she raised her hand to press the stray hair on her forehead. From the side, the youngster looked helplessly handsome. She exhaled deeply. Brother Mo, I won't be able to control myself if you continue saying such things. Hurry and shut up. Qin Mo laughed. He wanted to reach out to pinch her face, but when he realized there was someone beside him, he tightened his grip in his pocket. The cries continued. Someone walked over and said to Qin Mo, Captain Qin, you aren't giving us any chance to win. Didn't you say that entertainment is the main priority? If you want to dismantle a gun, we can't be faster than you. Back then, Qin Mo's dismantling technique had been used as a video material in the military. A large number of people had learned how to dismantle a gun. His speed had been the ultimate goal of training. At that time when they had seen those hands, there had only been one thought in their minds. That was too fast. It was indeed fast. They didn't even have the energy to look at the pair of hands. until the dismantling was completed and the video froze. They lowered their heads instinctively to look at their hands. They suspected that the person in the video was a soldier. His hands should be playing the piano. Now that they had seen this person, his face was harder to describe than his hands. Was the devil from the art team? The more they understood him, the more they realized how amazing he was. He was too amazing. It wasn't because of his rank as a major general. It was because of the aura he exuded and his ability to command and fight on the spot. There were many soldiers in their group who were conferred the title of the King of Soldiers. But in front of this person, they had all worn down some of the things they had brought from their original unit. After seeing the devil, they understood one thing. In the future, there were two things they needed to do for overseas missions. 1. Never forget that they were a soldier of China. 2. Never reveal their identity as a soldier of China, unless they had obtained permission from the higher-ups. On this point, the entire operation team was very consistent. Even though they were already in this unit, until now, they still didn't know what missions Captain Qin and the others had carried out. This was the difference between overseas missions and domestic missions. Perhaps after many years, when the events had passed for a long time, some of the heroes would gradually be known by people. Even the sacrifice would be the same. But there were still people who chose to carry out such missions. The devil standing in front of them was such a person. Many times, we thought we already knew all the heroes. But in reality, the real heroes wouldn't even be announced. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.